Assalamualaikum, my name is Hidayah. I'm from BTE.
Hi, my name is Muhammad Rizal Zulkifli and I'm from BTE.
My name is Muhammad Ghazali. I'm from BTE.
My name is Muhammad Azhar Abdul Rasid. I'm from BTE.
And I am Muhammad Kalish from BTE.
For our video, we will present about the ultraviolet visible spectroscopy, and we will explain on the purpose of this equipment, how it works, and the industry that use this equipment.
This is a schematic diagram of a typical setup of UV visible spectroscopy meter. UV visible spectroscopy setup consists of a light source. Light source can be simply as normal headlamp to a complicated lamp such as xenon arc lamp. And the second setup is the monochrometer. What is the monochrometer? This is an illustration of a monochrometer setup. Pure white light source consists of a variety of color in it. Each of them have their own uses. The function is to spread each of the light focus. The light source is focused by a collimating mirror. The diffraction grating disperses the light into a set of single of light colors. The focusing mirror focuses the light, and the function of slit is to let out one color only. The refraction grating can be adjusted so we can pick color what we want for our project.
When the light is turned on, the one wavelength of light will split into two by a beam splitter. Each of the light will pass through two compartments. One compartment is a reference, usually water or other materials. The other is the sample cell, which is the sample we want to measure. The two light intensity is then detected by two detectors. The detector is sometimes usually photodiode to measure light intensity. The two different light intensity is then converted to current for graphing.
Ultraviolet visible spectroscopy UV-VIS. What is the purpose of this equipment? UV-VIS spectroscopy is used to measure the concentration of chemical substances in a solution. In other words, it is done by measuring how much light is absorbed by a sample of a solution. This equipment refers to the absorption spectroscopy in the ultraviolet visible spectral region. This means it uses light in the visible and adjacent, that is, near ultraviolet and near infrared ranges. This equipment is often used in quantitative determination of solutions of transition metals and highly conjugated organic compounds. The principle of ultraviolet visible absorption is that molecules containing pi electrons or non-bonding electrons can absorb the energy in the form of ultraviolet or visible light to excite these electrons to higher antibonding molecular orbitals. The more easily excited the electrons, the longer the wavelength of light it can absorb.
Okay, for the definition of Beer-Lambert's law. The Beer-Lambert's law states that the absorbance of a solution is directly proportional to the concentration of the absorbing species in the solution and the path length. Okay, now let's talk about the formula involved in the Beer-Lambert's law. Okay, for the formula involved in the Beer-Lambert's law is A equals to log 10 IO over I or epsilon C L. As for the A is the measure of absorbance, IO is the intensity of the incident light, I is the transmitted intensity, L is the path length through the sample, and C is the concentration of the absorbing species, while epsilon is a constant as the molar absorptivity or extinction coefficient. Okay, after we have learned the formula, How about we try some example? Okay, to finding a concentration using the molar absorptivity. For instance, let's suppose you have a solution in a cell of length 1 cm. You measure the absorbance of the solution at a particular wavelength using a spectrometer. The value is 1.92. You have to find the value for molar absorptivity in a table of 19,400 for that wavelength. Okay, now the solution for that example. Okay, we can use the formula that we have just learned just now, which is A equals to epsilon LC, where A is 1.92 and epsilon is 19,400 and L is 1 and C that we want to find, which is the concentration of the absorbent. Okay, we can derive the formula is C equals to 1.92 over 19,400 and the answer is 9.90 times 10 power of negative 5 mole. Okay, now let's move on into the absorption graph. The diagram below shows a simple UV visible absorption spectrum for butadiene. The absorbance on the vertical axis is just a measure of the amount of light being absorbed. The higher the value, the more of a particular wavelength is being absorbed. You will see that absorption peaks at a value of 217 nanometer. This is the ultraviolet, and so there will be no visible sign of any light being absorbed. Butadiene is a colorless state. You read the symbol on the graph as lambda map.
UV-VIS in industry. 1. Used in the semiconductor industry to measure the thickness and optical properties of thin film on a wafer. It measures the reflectance of light and can be analyzed via the Forohi-Blumer dispersion equation to determine the index of refraction N and the extinction coefficient K of a given film across the measured spectral range. Samples were prepared for measurement by piling a small amount on a layer of barium sulfate powder. Sample powder spread into a thin uniform layer using a glass rod. Integrating sphere attachment was mounted in the UV-3600 UV-VIS spectrophotometer. Next, it is used in wastewater treatment plant. Using measurement of the whole UV-VIS spectrum enables to monitor changes in wastewater concentration as well as in wastewater composition. Operators of wastewater treatment plants benefit when changes of concentration and composition of industrial inlet can be detected, and therefore a possible failure of the treatment plant performance can be avoided. The instrument used is a submersible UV-VIS spectrometer. The instrument utilizes the whole UV-VIS range between 200 and 750 nm. With just one single instrument, nitrate, organic matter and suspended solids can be measured simultaneously. The spectrometer is installed directly in the process and measured in real time. It is equipped with a very effective auto-cleaning system using pressured air that enables measurement at the effluent of a wastewater treatment plant or directly in the sewer for several weeks without maintenance.